Well, dear students, this is Language and Linguistics Online, and today I want to talk about the difference between word for word and sense for sense translation. So, in translation studies, we have already talked about that what is meant by translation. So, the art of converting the source language into the target language is called translation. I have already talked about oral translation, which is called interpretation. I have also talked about interlingual translation, which is called proper translation, and I told you that we will be talking about proper translation throughout different kinds of videos. Now you should also remember one debate that we trace back to Cicero and Jerome is between word for word translation and sense for sense translation. So when we read Cicero, he talks about sense for sense translation. He does not like that people should go for word for word translation, because in this way he feels that proper translation cannot be carried out. For this I will be reading some of the passages from Jeremy Mendes' book. The Roman rhetorician and politician outlined his approach to translation, introducing his own translation from the Greek of speeches of the 4th century orators, and I did not translate them as an interpreter but as an orator, keeping the same ideas and forms, or as one might say, the figures of thought, but in language which conforms to our usage. So we can see that he is saying that he is keeping in mind the content. He is emphasizing the content. So for him, thoughts, ideas, content, they are very important. And in so doing, I did not hold it necessary to render word for word. So he did not translate word for word, but I preserved the general style and force of the language. No doubt, he is saying he tried to keep the style, the force of the language, in which the source text was written, in which the source language was used, but he is keeping in mind and trying to understand and translate the content, the thoughts, the ideas, sense for sense. So he did not like the idea of forming word for word translation. The disparagement of word for word translation came from others as well, such as Horace, who in short but famous passage in his Art Poetica underlines the goal of producing an aesthetically pleasing and creative poetic text in the target language. This attitude had great influence on the succeeding centuries. Thus, Jerome, the most famous of all Western translators, cites the authority of Cicero's approach to justify his own Latin version and translation of the Christian Bible, later to become known as Latin Vulgate. So, when he was translating Bible, he did not consider the already translated text. Rather, he went towards Hebrew language. He thought that Hebrew should be understood. He thought that he should consult Hebrew text and then he should translate the Bible into the target language. No doubt some of the people did not like his idea and they spoke against him. And that is why today we find that there is Old Testament and New Testament and different versions of Bible in the market. But he considered that he should have gone and consulted Hebrew language, the original language in which Bible was produced. And here you should remember, as I have already told you, that if somebody makes a mistake in translating Bible, people called him heretic and they punished him. Okay, so much so this practice we find when people were translating the Holy Quran as well. Jerome says, now I not only admit but freely announce that in translating from the Greek, except of course in the case of the Holy Scripture, where even the syntax contains a mystery, I rendered not word for word but sense for sense. He emphasized that he rendered sense for sense. Word for word translation is also called literal translation. And sense for sense translation is also called free translation. Though free translation is quite different, you should remember. It does not mean that you can like. It does not mean that whatever you want to produce according to your audience, you can produce it. So free translation also gives this concept. But here free translation is also called sense for sense translation. Dear students, in my today's class, I have talked about word for word translation, which is called literal translation, and sense for sense translation, which is also called free translation. Though most of the translators, they say that we should go for sense for sense translation and we should avoid word for word translation because we cannot find the same kind of words in other language. Culture is different, language is different, so the same equivalent words or ideas, they cannot be found in the two different languages. Thank you very much.